Hey guys, it's Sean Ribs here coming at you with another daily Slay the Spire video. Today I want to talk about Burst, a silent rare. This turn your next skill is played twice, is what this card says. When upgraded, your next two skills get played twice. I typically do not prioritize this upgrade at all, but that's what it does, get that out of the way. Burst is a card that I have basically pulled a complete 180 on. Since I started playing the game. When I started playing the game, Ascension mode wasn't even out yet, of course, so I was just playing non-Ascension. And to me, Burst was a card which, like, it's a combo card which doesn't do enough when it works, and can really suck when it doesn't. So, the worst case scenario for Burst is you draw it in a hand with no skills in it, and that can actually cause you to die. On Silent, typically your skills are, like, defensive stuff. Like, I think a quintessential silent skill would be like Cloak and Dagger or Backflip. These are your quintessential common skills. And so these skills are what we're using to mitigate damage and actually survive until the next turn. Because Silent doesn't have a huge health pool, doesn't usually have a lot of sustain. We want to actually stop the damage from coming in and killing us. That's the idea. So if you have like a certain number of skills in your deck and they're in charge of blocking, every now and then you'll only draw one of them in a turn. And if it's a Backflip or a Cloak and Dagger, well, if it's a Backflip, you can draw 2 more cards and hopefully get another block card if you need to. If it's a Cloak and Dagger, at least you have 6 block, right? But if your one skill that you draw in that turn happens to be Burst, not only do you not have anything to do with Burst because it doesn't have another skill in your hand to double up, you're also, like, dead. I mean, hopefully you're not getting attacked for very much that turn, because if you are, you're in for a bad time. You can go very, very, very heavy on skills in Silent, and at non-Ascension, that's something that's even more possible, and that makes it less of a consideration for Burst. But at Ascension 15, Silent typically wants to add quite a few attacks early in the game, stuff like Flying Knee or Sucker Punch or Dagger Spray or Slice. These are all vital additions to early game Silent decks, just because Silent needs more damage to deal with tough hallway fights and Act 1 elites. And so, like, this is a real consideration that you might draw hands which don't have skills in them and Burst just won't work. And for a really long time, I was happy for that to be my evaluation of the card, basically. Like, this is a card which, you know, it has some obvious synergies. Like, it can make it so... Whereas Burst Catalyst, I think this is, like, a thing that lots of people like, and it's really flashy, and, I mean, it is, but, like, Burst Catalyst, now we triple an enemy's poison. That's really strong. Cool. That's super strong. But for me, for a long time, I just felt like, you know, that was so strong that it was, like, almost needless. You can just triple an enemy's poison without the burst, and that's probably enough for you. And it doesn't make up for the fact that sometimes burst is a dead draw, and it's taking up space from cards which do things more reliably. For a long time, that was my opinion about burst. And then as I tried more and more to win streak on Silent, I just got less and less confident in Silent's mitigation package that I was focused on. The mitigation package, which is like After Image and Footwork and lots of low-cost block cards like Cloak and Dagger and Backflip. It just wasn't working that well for me, and it wasn't working that consistently for me. It relied on too many specific cards. It took too long in fights to set up. It meant that I couldn't, like, front load as much damage as I wanted in my deck, because my deck was just full of backflips and footworks instead of cards which attacked. And even when it was set up, it, like, didn't always work. There are bosses in the game that can just deal more damage than you can reasonably mitigate with After Image and Footwork and block. I'm not even just thinking about end bosses like the Awakened one, I think would be a pretty clear example. But even just like Act 2 hallway fights, sometimes you get frailed by an enemy who can attack you for 25 in a turn, and you just can't block enough. You just need something else to deal with that fight reasonably. And there's basically only one other mitigation engine for Silent, which is based on Malaise. Well, there are relic-based mitigation engines, but you don't get relics that often. But yeah, you can like do this Malaise thing, and Malaise is really, really strong with Burst. And the more that I experimented with Malaise, the more I recognized that Malaise is insane, and bursting a Malaise is actually worth it. Malaising Time Eater for 4 can win you the game, but like bursting a Malaise to get Time Eater for 8 is gonna do better for you. So I started putting Burst in my decks, and this really weird thing happened where Burst has just been like consistently really strong for me, and I had no idea, sitting back and analyzing this card, how many just like middling to middling high value things it could do. Burst is incredible with X cards. So Doppelganger is another card that has gone way up in my evaluation recently. And the X cards sort of help cancel out Burst's inconsistency, because anytime you have an X card in your hand, if you have X cards in your deck, anytime you draw one, you can guarantee that you use all of the energy that turn more or less effectively. Putting all of your excess energy that you don't have good cards to spend on into a Doppelganger for a turn, there's very little wrong with that. Putting all of your excess energy into a Malaise is 100% great. Even just like bursting a Cloak and Dagger Plus though, like this has been really strong for me. Burst a Cloak and Dagger Plus and then like play Finisher or something like that. Bursting a Leg Sweep like really isn't that bad. And the more that I've played around with this, the more I've just like started to think that Footwork and Afterimage are not super strong cards in Silent. I'm pretty sure I haven't done a Footwork or an Afterimage video yet, right? Have I? I don't remember. But when I get to that, I'll talk more about it. But my decks, which are more about like Burst and Doppelganger and Malaise, get to do much more impressive things in the early turns, because these cards are like 6 cards out of 30 instead of a situation where like 20 cards out of 30 are built toward mitigation exclusively. And they get to do much stronger things as well. Malaising the Time Eater for 24 shuts that fight down immediately. You don't have to worry about blocking a bunch anymore. Malaising the Awakened one for 24, pretty much the same thing. Then you set up a second big Malaise with Burst for the second phase of the fight. So we can also fit a bunch of aggressive cards in the deck. A couple of days ago, a few days ago now, I talked about Hemokinesis and Ironclad and how it was really strong to have an attack which was just 1 card and upped your deck's damage output for early game so much. Because then you could build, some other deck for late game, and there was only 1 card in it that had to be dedicated to that early game damage. Whereas if you were filling your deck up with Twin Strikes and Clotheslines and stuff, you had a bigger chunk of your deck that was early game damage, and that made it unwieldy to get the deck good at other things. If you're building conceptually around Burst, you just, there are going to be 4 or 5 things that Burst hits in your deck, which it's insane with. And probably those things are insane enough that the rest of your deck can do a lot more for you than just block. So you can fill your deck up with cards like Backflip and Flying Knee and Dagger Spray, and Skewer is a really good one, and Endless Agony can be a big part of your deck. There's just a lot more room in a deck like this to do strong things, and I think that's really cool. So, numerically, Burst has been performing insanely well for me. Malaise is my highest priority card in Silent and has an 80% win rate, and Burst has gone, I think it has 2 losses and 16 picks or something like that, 2 losses and 17 picks. It's just been really strong for me. I think another key realization that I had about this card, this Burst card, is you only have to beat the act bosses for the most part in the like latter phases of the game. And burst lets you have something that's strong enough to kill them with like very little else going on. And even if your deck isn't that consistent in hallway fights or whatever, you can use campfires to rest. You can take an easy path through Act 3 or something, and you can just get to the act boss and kill them. And, you know, maybe it's possible for your deck to get really unlucky, and maybe 10% of the time burst never gets drawn with anything that's good for it. You didn't get to have a well-laid plans in this run. Well-laid plans is an excellent power to pick up with burst. Helps you set up like a big burst malaise or something. But maybe you didn't get one and you just never draw burst with a good skill and you die, and that happens 10% of the time. That's fine on Ascension 15. Like, in Ascension 15, we're not talking about silent win rates that are hitting 90%. Not yet. Maybe someday we'll get there. But for now, like, having a 60% win rate with silent would be something I would love. Going 5-0 or better on silent for a win streak would be just groovy for me. And so that inconsistency that burst has isn't such a huge deal. Anyway, I like burst a lot. It's not a card that I'm likely to put in my deck in the first half of Act 1, but it starts to rapidly become something that I'm considering as I get into like floor 10, 11, 12, stuff like that. I have taken it from the Act 1 boss before, I'm pretty sure. If I have a malaise in my deck, it's instantly going in, but even if I don't have a target for it yet, malaise is an uncommon, which you see a decent amount. Doppelganger, you actually do see a decent amount of these because you get rare cards from Act bosses, so you have a decent shot at it on the Act 1 or Act 2 boss. And then, like, Adrenaline is a great burst target. There are just lots of other things that you can do with the card. It's a really fun card. It's really good with the intangible event that's just been added to the game in Act 2, where you get 5 cards which make you intangible. Do I have those here? Yeah, 5 copies of Apparition. Burst is great with this one. It's a cool card. I highly recommend taking Burst and taking it with high priority on silent. And I highly recommend, like, if you haven't done this much, just try experimenting with decks which are not about afterimage and footwork. There are just other ways to get mitigation, and there are even ways to, you know, do things which are so strong that you don't need to worry too much about that mitigation package. I think the perfect example of that would be the, like, burst plus catalyst plus bouncing flask deck, where, like, you'll just kill stuff before it kills you if you're resting at campfires. You might want some max HP and maybe a few block cards, but there are some really, really strong things that silent can do which do not require tons of one-cost block. And you don't always want to aim for that, but if your footwork and afterimage isn't coming together, if you want to be beating Ascension 15 on silent, you may want to just look for something broken that can happen, and often burst is going to be a key part of letting those broken things occur. Alright. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I've been Joe and Ribs. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I have links to my Discord and my Twitch stream and stuff like that below if you want to come say hi. And I'll be back tomorrow with another Slay the Spire card talk. So, hope to see you there. Bye-bye.